with StreamYard is it just automatically records when you go live. So, Ernell, do you want to start us off, or
Yes, good afternoon, or should we say yes, good afternoon from Philippines, and then also good morning here from Budapest, Hungary. Welcome to another edition of the Pinoy Athletics Track Talk with me. My name is Coach Airnel, currently a PhD student candidate for PhD at the University of Physical Education in Budapest, Hungary. And with me is my co-founder, Andrew Piri from Australia, who is a fellow of the Association for Track and Field Statisticians. And we have our special guest this afternoon, who is the athletics director of Southwestern University, FINMA University in Cebu City. So his name is Coach Pio Solon, who's also a licensed and certified strength and conditioning coach, and also a good friend of us from Ateneo de Davao University with his engagements in strength and conditioning, especially in boxing and also in basketball. So, Andrew?
okay? So, for today, we'll be keeping it a civil discussion on the current situation with Philippine athletics. So, on the agenda, the three things we're going to discuss. Um, Not in any particular order amongst the three, but updates on the Southeast Asian Games. So, data wise, where do our athletes stand compared to the other countries? I mean, athletics is a measurable sport. So, with March being the deadline for entry by name for the Southeast Asian Games, which is just 2 months away, which of our athletes have hit the bronze medal standard for the Southeast Asian Games, and how far ahead, or how far ahead are we in some events, and um, where do the other countries stand based on the results of the last 12 months? What are we looking at in terms of performances? Secondly, we were also going to be discussing coaching in the Philippines, particularly at the grassroots level, um, with regards to the pathways for the athletes at that grassroots level. Thirdly, we're going to be discussing competitions, the need for more competitions at the provincial and regional level stage, and also with the Omicron coming around the corner, how exactly is we're going to navigate around, having meets when the Omicron is in place, as the other countries have somehow, been in the same boat and managed to do it. Um, Question also, like, if there's a 50-50 chance after talking to some people that the SEA Games itself might be cancelled, what are the alternative meets we can send our athletes to? The Asian Games later on in the year is a very higher quality standard meet, which a lot of our athletes probably can't qualify for. So, what are the other alternative meets on the international level that we can send our athletes to if the SEA Games kind of gets brushed aside with this Omicron variant? So, Ernell, will start with you at Pio. You can feel free to ask questions. We'll start with the coaching situation at the grassroots level and the coaching situation in the Philippines in general.
Okay, so of course, in terms of athletics, one thing that we should notice as well is that how our coaching standards in the Philippines can be improved, and of course, on the context of a sport director, I would like to ask Coach Pio Solon what is his ideas and also his points of view on what would be the ideal situation of coaching standards in the Philippines as a sport director, Coach Pio.
Right. So, well, I'll address this from uh, the context of the university, number one, and perhaps understanding a little bit of the logistical challenges. All right. So, in a perfect world, um, all your coaches are going to be first and college graduates with an understanding of the basis, the most basic parts of anatomy and physiology. If your coaches get that, you can teach them anything, right? Um, I see the gap. What I see the gaps are in coaching in the Philippines is we do not have an understanding of the foundational knowledges of coaching, anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, exercise on and so forth. So what happens is, we have coaches who um, have an understanding, but it's not a deeper understanding. And so, and there's not a lot of incentive to get into coaching. You know, you compare going into coaching and other things as, hold on, let me check my audio.
Okay, as we check the audio, Andrew, so what do you think would be the ideal situation of coaching, especially for local coaches in the Philippines? Because the usual situation is that the coaches in the Philippines produce the grassroots athletes, but then most of them are not yet really recognized or not given enough, should we say, compensation in terms of their sporting bodies.
Think that the athletes in the Philippines should really have the right to choose which coach they want to work with, because like if you're with a coach and you're getting improvements from that coach and you want to stay with that coach, I don't see why you shouldn't be able to do that. In a lot of other countries, athletes have the right to choose which coach they want to continue their journey with. They don't get told you have to train with this coach or train with that coach. The athletes themselves decide who they want to work with, and I think that that should be the right of the athletes to choose who they want to work with. I don't think it's right that you're with one coach one day and then you get told you have to go and train with this coach and then you don't get a result, but you still have to train with the coach. You know, it's more if an athlete's working with a coach and the coach doesn't improve them, then the athlete will decide on their own, okay, I want to go and switch to another coach, and they should be allowed to do that. I mean, in my view, if you're training like take for example here in Australia, you're training an athlete, the athlete actually pays the coach in Australia, so it's a bit different, okay? And the athlete pays the coach, and if the athlete doesn't improve anymore with the coach isn't going to get paid anymore. The athlete's going to go and pay another coach that's going to improve them. And I don't think it's right that, I think that athletes should have the full right to choose which coach they want to work with. I don't think it's right at all that they get, they get told, well, you have to work with this coach, you have to work with that coach. Because if they're not improving with a coach, then why shouldn't they be allowed to choose another coach? You know, that's how I see it. I mean, you can have someone who is a wonderful coach who gets results, and you can have an athlete who's a great athlete who gets results, but sometimes the chemistry is not there. Sometimes that doesn't make the coach a bad coach or the athlete a bad coach. Sometimes they're just not compatible. And you need to take that into account as well in an athlete coaching relationship, is that sometimes athletes and coaches just don't match. And would you rather lose the coach and lose the athlete? I mean, would you lose the athlete because they don't want to work with that particular coach because they're not improving with that coach? That's what I'm saying. You can't force compatibility. It's either there or it's not. That's,
Yes.
what I want to just say about the coaching situation in the Philippines is that, you have to, you're going to work with a coach. The athlete has to, have that connection with the coach, and it's not always there. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, and that doesn't make the coach any worse or the athlete any worse. It just isn't meant to be sometimes. And as a coach, you should have, if you're a good coach, what you should have in your head is that you're not going to be compatible with every athlete that walks through the door. Sometimes, sometimes it just doesn't work because not everyone gets along.
Yes, yes, that's right. Because of course, it's also the situation with the federations that, of course, also somewhat provide the direction towards sport coaching. So I think that would be something that maybe the next administration or the next officers can look on. Because of course, most of the coaches in their provinces are doing their coaching pro bono, and not all teachers can be good coaches, but they can be good administrators. In my 5 to 6 experience with working with the Palarong Pambansa system, I know there are teachers who are good as coaches, but they are not good administrators. But then there are also good coaches slash teachers that are good at administrative work, but not really efficient or proficient in terms of the actual coaching situations. So I think that's something that we should look on, that different people have different strengths and weaknesses, and not all had the panacea, or should we say the spring or the fountain of everything that they know. For example, as a coach, I have a weak spot in coaching jumping, and if it's in high jump or in long jump, I can do the basic training. But of course, if it's really specialized, I ask someone who is a jumping coach and then do the coaching. But then, in terms of the program structure, what are the things that should be done when would be the overload is the overload and deload, etc. will be done, then at least I can do it. So, but other coaches have a little or not so familiar situation with the concept of periodization, with long-term athlete development, and other philosophies of coaching. So that's where we come in. So I think this is the reason that we should always continue to have, or to have really a systematized coaching education system in the Philippines, which is unfortunately we still don't have. We have physical education, but physical education and sport coaching education are different schools of thought. So I think that's something that we can work on. Maybe if of course we have the Philippine Sports Institute, but of course we hope that that sometime that this can be also done, that they provide really a good coaching program, or good ideal coaching education program for aspiring coaches, especially in the grassroots level, because it gives them premium on what they're doing. The coaches in in my experience with the local coaches in the Philippines, they have simple joys. It's only being recognized and give the enough credit, or if possible enough compensation to continue for their coaching, for their passion towards coaching. Because it's really a different story when they are trying when we're doing their work pro bono, but they don't receive anything in return, and they are the most generous people in Philippine sports, the local coaches. So, Coach Pio.
I think also it reflects the state, no, of society as a whole. I think in Enzo's case, in Australia, you have clubs, and the coaches earn their living from having clubs. But when we go to the Philippines, you have urban centers who can do that, right? But it's not as developed as it could be. And you have the rural communities, which is abundant in talent, but who might not be able to afford it. So you have the disparity in wealth. You have a lot of people who can afford, but there's also this segment of society who cannot afford for the club. So yeah, I think having the club concept is almost there. It's getting there. Mindanao Blue Knights. You just need more of that, and the more the coaches also have to understand that part of it is they really have to run their clubs like a business as well, in order to make coaching a sustainable venture. The better able we're, not just to equip coaches with the coaching side, but to teach them how to run their own clubs as a business, I think makes sport more sustainable. It makes the
Yeah.
development of sport, more sustainable in this country.
Yes.
I understand with the setup of the Philippines because I've lived there for many years. I mean, working for PSC for two, and then with the Zamboanga del Sur Sports Academy as their head athletics coach for 2 years. I don't mean any offence by that, but like what I'm basically saying is, um, with the club system, one of the issues or the barriers in the Philippines is that the club system really only caters for those who can afford to, be part of the club. Whereas, the system we seem to have in the Philippines at the moment is, the club system, we look at the principle of the leisure principle, where, athletics is a leisure sport, which, is, sports being considered a leisure activity is something that's accessible for the people who can afford to do it. The difference in the Philippines is it's more scholastic based. So that means that it's more of a charity type thing to help the poor rise up from poverty rather than being more for those, just for those who can afford it, that can go to through a club system. What we've seen during the pandemic is that all that whole sort of scholastic system kind of becoming unraveled. because it really can't cope with the challenges brought upon by the pandemic. Um, I mean, how long has it been since we've had a UAAP championships? The last one was in December of 2018, and it's not looking feasible in the first half of 2022. So it's the longest break for the UAAP since the Second World War at this point.
Yes, I think because of the pandemic situation, and of course with the unpredictability of the situation in the Philippines, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think one thing that we should also look on is if the things will be better. So what are the standards of doing athletics competition in the new normal? If these things are will be standardized, then I think we can still have the competitions. For example, there are limited audiences, and then of course the PCR test should be required, and also there are also quarantine or isolation rooms. In the context, for example, on the or the example of the German Athletics Championships, they did it within a bubble last summer. So according to Alexander Volkat, which is one of our one of our friends who are part of the German national athletics team, they need to arrive like only 48 hours before the competition, and they need first a pre-PCR test before they arrive, and then on the spot PCR antigen test. When they are all negative, then that's the time that they can get inside the stadium, and then they have only two things that they can go: the stadium and their accommodation, and they are ushered by the police. In our experience with volunteering with the World Judo Championships, once we enter the volunteering task in the World Judo Championships, I need, of course, they tested us, 200 of us, on the spot PCRs. And then when the results are released, then there's a time that we enter the competition. And then when we get our kits, or when we get our orientation, we are shuttled to the hotel, and we cannot get out of the hotel without prior permission from the police, or if a police will escort me to
Mm.
the task that, for example, I need to do an admin errands to another to the committee. So I cannot go it on my own. I need to ask the police, and they drive me to their police car. Even
Mm.
it's just only like 10-50 meters, and that's the situation, because they want to because they said this is the bubble system, so we must accept this kind of new normal and adapt on these kind of situations. And I think Singapore has already this policy of they made already the standards of adapting in terms of doing sport competitions in the new normal, doing bubbles and semi bubbles, as should we say, because there are some who had limited access audience, and I think they are like, for example, 25% of the capacity of the stadium or something like this. So we must accept the fact that the virus will stay here and unfortunately live with us. And I think that's the mindset now of the especially here in Europe, that we need to get vaccinated. We need to be careful, because the virus will stay, and we need to adapt with the situation, that
Yeah.
rather than just waiting for the pandemic to subside and for all of us to have that herd immunity, which will take some time. So that is the mindset, to adapt and to change our ways of doing sport by through bubbles, through restrictions, and of course, the participation can be only online. So we must accept the fact that if we want to step up in terms of doing the sport competitions in the new normal, we need to learn to adapt, especially our stakeholders.
Yeah,
Your
that's
answer?
true, and I think that's the most challenging part because everyone is waiting.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
who will start the ball rolling? So we see that this is possible for professional sports because there's money to be lost.
Yeah.
Um, we're seeing that some movement in the UAAP and NCA precisely because TV networks are involved. But
Yeah.
when you look at the grassroots level, we're still waiting,
Mm-hmm.
and there's I think clarity is missing. You mentioned that the standards need to be in place. And who's gonna write those standards? Is it the
Exactly.
IATF?
That's also that's another
And
point
is
of
it
view.
the LGU? Is it the national government? So there are a lot of questions. Enzo, how is it in Australia? Are
Athletic
competitions?
meets are running. Athletic meets are, and there's an athletic meet every week here. Even though we have the pandemic, we
Yeah,
still have health protocols in place. Like spray bottles, rapid tests, that sort of thing. But we have athletic meet. We've been having athletic meets every week for the whole season, pretty much. Which our athletic season in Australia starts in about October, November. We've
yeah,
had athletic meets pretty much every week. There hasn't been that. There's been some disruptions, but you know, like the other Southeast Asian nations, we've just been flowing with our athletic meets. We've basically put in protocols that allow us to have athletic meets. The same in the United States, the same with some of the Southeast Asian nations such as Vietnam and the Thais and Malaysians to some extent have been able to, you know, really adapt their competitions to allow them to continue to happen to help them build up towards the Southeast Asian Games. And that's something I feel that could have been handled better during the last 18 to 20 months of the pandemic for the athletic situation. Is we're starting to fall quite far behind because of these adaptative measures that were needed, but really haven't been put in place. In terms of other countries, we're in the same situation with us with the COVID pandemic, but they're able to still have meets, and now we're discussing really on the competition discussion side of things is SEA Games and it's going to be in 2 months, and well, not in 2 months, it's in 4 months, but 2 months. We've got basically 2 months to submit
Mm,
our lineup for the SEA Games, and
yeah.
we've had just a national championships in Baguio, which was restricted, but that's the only meet that has really been organised by Philippine Track and Field so far as the national championships, and based on the results of those national championships for the back in Baguio, these results from the national championships have not really displayed much in the top 10 in a lot of events in terms of where we are compared to where the other countries are. And like I said before, I don't think that the other countries are going to wait for us to catch up. I think that they're going to keep pushing to look at taking some of those 11 golds off us if we're not ready for it.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe, buddy. To continue. So, we can, if you can share some of the datas that you have, if possible.
Yeah, I can do so. So I'll just see if I can open up the Excel. Um, I just open up the Excel. I've just put Windows. Well, Windows 11 just installed itself on my computer the other day,
Oh,
so
okay.
that was pretty interesting how that happened. Um, I just, it is a very small screen. Here we go. So can you see these results clearly,
Yes, we can.
guys?
We can see it. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So you can read all the. It's not too small to read or anything like that. I'm just going to check on the StreamYard to see if these results are readable. I might increase the size a little bit to.
You
Um,
can maybe zoom
yeah,
the
I'll zoom in a little
yeah,
bit.
zoom on the Excel
Maybe
file.
zoom in another 30% to try, so that people on the smaller cell phones and
Yeah.
stuff can actually see some of these results. Um, I'll just ask the audience because I know there's people tuned in and they're watching this that um, um, that if they can't read what we have here, just let me know and I'll try and enlarge the writing a little bit more because there are people watching, and if they can't see the data that I'm presenting here, then they can just post in the comments and I'll try to increase the zoom size a little bit more. So regarding the 60-meter dash, I think we will disregard this event because it's not played at the SEA Games, and we'll look at the 100-meter dash for the athletics. So in the 100-meter women's, we're pretty strong because we're more reliant on the Phil American athletes, in particular the Richardsons, Knott, and Zia Nelson, who are doing fairly well because they're able to train during the pandemic. So, we're ahead. And then Chin, who's the SEA Games champion from Vietnam, is tucked in there in the top four. So like there's a chance that we could land top two, or we could get two of the top three medals in the women's 100. Depending on how that rolls. Then going to the 200, again we're looking more likely in the 200 with Christina not a long way ahead of everybody else in Southeast Asia. So that the women's 1 and 2, the 100 is, in my view, it's like doable. The 200 is fairly safe in terms of events. Then we move to the 400, the 400 meter women. So, we've only got one woman ranked in the top 10 in Southeast Asia, and that's Full American Robin Brown, ranked in 8th. I think the surprise is the Vietnamese and the big improvement on by this Indonesian girl who's ranked 1st, who has improved her national record by well over a second at their national championships a couple of months ago. So the Indonesians, who were not a factor in the women's 4x4, now have 3 of the top 10 women in Southeast Asia, and we have 1. So that reflects on our 4x4 is that the women's 4x4 has Vietnam with 4 runners in the top, Indonesia with 3 runners in the top, and Malaysia and the Philippines each with 1 runner in the top. So I see our women's 4x4, which came 3rd last time, really struggling against the Vietnamese and the Indonesians and battling it out with Malaysia to maintain their bronze. That's in the relay. We move into the 800. We have nobody ranked in the top 10, and in the 800, that event is expected to be dominated by the very strong Vietnamese woman who landed 1-2 last time, as is the women's 1500. We have nobody ranked in that event as well, as is the women's 5000. We scored 3rd place in that event, but we have nobody ranked this year as well in the women's 5000. The key thing to really note in the women's 5000 is the massive improvements of some of these Vietnamese athletes that are improving their best times by nearly whole minutes in terms of their progression at their recent national championships. So 8, 1, 5, 5,000 events, very hard to score even a bronze in. 10,000 meters. This is the interesting thing that I would like you to note. This girl who is the top of the women's 10,000 meters, Pham Thi Hong Lei, she is the SEA Games bronze medalist in the marathon in the last Southeast Asian Games, and she has improved her 10,000 meter time by more than a minute since she ran in the Southeast Asian Games. In fact, by 2 minutes in the 10,000 meters, which, let me put it into perspective. If Thi Hong Lei will run the marathon and she runs each, segment, and I think it was, by my calculation, 38 minutes. If she just can maintain that 38-minute pace with the 34:01 all-out pace for the women's marathon, she's going to end up running about 2:40 in the women's marathon as well, which is well ahead of our 2 competitors. So basically, Thi Hong Lei for the marathon is pretty far ahead of our current women marathoners right now. And reflectively, she has a best 10,000 meter time about 3 to 3.5 minutes faster than our top 2 women marathoners compared to their 10K all-time personal bests. Then going down in the events, we did manage to get a bronze in the SEA Games in the last SEA Games from Joy Gagnell, with a silver in the last SEA Games at 10:59. However, there are currently 6 women, or if we go by the 2 per country rule, 2 women from Vietnam and 2 women from Indonesia who are ahead of Joy Gagnell's bronze medal time in the last SEA Games. So, we didn't have a steeplechase at the national championships, so Joy didn't really get an opportunity to, come out and, run. So we're not sure what her current performance is at this point, but, based on the data we have, there are 6 women who already passed her silver medal time, 4 of which are allowed to compete, because you're only allowed 2 athletes per country, so there will be 2 Vietnamese and 2 Indonesians who are ahead of the silver medal standard at the Southeast Asian Games in May. Then moving further down, I'll skip the half marathon, I'll move to the marathon. So in the marathon, it's interesting because there are 4 women who are ahead of the gold medal standard at last SEA Games. An Indonesian, 2 Vietnamese, and a Thai. And as that falls under the 2 per country rule, all 4 of these athletes will be up against our 2 marathoners at the Southeast Asian Games, which presents a further challenge in the women's marathon. Looking at the data here, what I can say is for women's events for 400 meters and up, Christina Knott is, like in the 1 and the 2 is a chance for the golds in those events. But any event 400 meters to marathon, the Vietnamese have great depth in those events, meaning they don't just have 1 or 2 athletes in some events that are ahead of ours. They have like 4, 5, or 6 athletes that are ahead of ours in those events. So they have a lot of athletes to pick and choose from in their roster that they can play around with who they're going to enter in each event. They can spread their athletes out. And this is how the Vietnamese have dominated women's athletics at the SEA Games for the past 3 SEA Games. Vietnam started at the same with the Philippines in 2013 with 6 golds. In 2015, they increased that to 9. In 2017, they increased that to 17 golds. And in 2019, they ended up with 15 or 16 golds. So Vietnam, for the last 3 SEA Games, has topped the medal tally in athletics without having the advantage of being the host yet. And this time they are the host. So, that gives them, that if we go off the math, that puts them at around 20 to 25 golds if they're getting, if they're getting 16 to 17 without even 15 to 17 without even being the host. Because you always get more medals, you always get more golds, as displayed with the Philippines at the last SEA Games when you're the host. Usually the Philippines was getting 5 or 6 golds. As soon as they became the host, the amount of medals doubled because the host has an advantage over the other countries when it comes to the medal tally. They get more than what they usually would get. And, like Vietnam now has that advantage in terms of, in terms of being the host. As for the walks, again, we don't have anyone ranked in the top 10 yet. 20K walks, we don't have anyone ranked in those events. I feel that, I'm going to just go out there and say this. The walks is an event we could really be good at, as it doesn't really require a huge amount of genetic material to be a great walkathon. If the walks basically got more attention at local meets and domestic meets, I feel that we could be good at the walks. It's an event that we could really excel in if we put the investment or put the opportunities there to help create more depth in that event. Again, looking at the women's 100 hurdles next, we have 1 athlete ranked in the top 10. I believe that may have been a slightly wind-dated time, but yeah, we do have 1 athlete ranked 8th in the women's hurdles. I believe she finished 6th or 7th at the last SEA Games. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 athletes all below 14. So it's a fairly competitive event now, this women's 100 hurdles, with Vietnamese and the Indonesians looking to battle it out here for those medals. And then moving down to the women's 400 hurdles, I'd like to say that, traditionally last SEA Games, 2 Vietnamese women and American athlete Robin Lauren Brown were the top 2 in the 3rd place. So, Robin Lauren Brown is still having quite a fantastic season, trains very hard over there in the part of the US and has improved her personal best by nearly a whole second since what she ran at the SEA Games was only 59.08 and PB was about 58.4 or something. She's come out around a 57.65. So, Robin just continues to improve from just putting in that effort. And We have Bernal and Behoy, who was fourth last year, ranked in sixth place at this stage, still, 3 seconds away from that bronze medal standard from the last SEA Games at this point. Scrolling down to the long jump women's. So long jump women's, we're not ranked in the top 3 at this point, but that 616 meter standard is a relatively easy standard compared to previous SEA Games, because usually, sometimes it's taken 640 to go to the SEA Games. I strongly think that Catherine K. Santos and Maristela Torres, who jumped 606, if they just have one more meet, they just need at least one more meet. Even if they could even jump that on their next meet. If they get to go to Asian Indoors in February, or they get some other competition, they've come out and jumped 606, with no meets for ages and, with not that much training. And, they've come out and and they're only 10 centimeters away from the standard. So, if you adjust your check mark a little bit, if you put on a little bit more speed, if you lose a little bit more weight, if you get a little bit stronger in the gym, you're already there. So, I think if they just need meets, and if they get meets, those two athletes, even though they're a bit older at 40 and 31, they'll hit that 616, and they'll put themselves on the plane to Vietnam. I think that's very doable for the two of them. Looking at the lineup, you've got Londa, who's clearly the favourite, who won the last couple of SEA Games, and you have Buti Tao, who's just come back from pregnancy, who's a former Asian champion in the women's long jump. Then also moving to the other events, the triple jump, we have nobody ranked in that event anymore. Like Ty is looking fairly convincing in that event. Moving down to the high jump, again, we have nobody ranked in the top 10 of that event. It'd be between the Singaporeans and the Vietnamese and maybe the Malaysians. Pole vault. Okay, so pole vault, yeah, you've got Natalie Oy from the US, who's continually jumping around the 430 mark, which is very convincing at the Southeast Asian level. So looking at defending her gold fairly relatively easy here. She's well ahead of everybody else. You also have Aliana Nicholas ranked fifth, needing to get her performance up a little bit more to hit that SEA bronze mark of 4 meters. And there's only one young athlete there from Indonesia who's jumped 4. So Natalie's looking fairly convincing in this event at this point in time. The women's shot put, you have one Phil American who's ranked in the top 10. Again, not within the range of those gold marks, unfortunately, as they're within about 2 meters ahead. The Indonesian and Thai athlete. Moving to the discus, again the same Phil American ranked 9th, but not within the medal range and not hitting the qualifying standard yet. And then in the hammer throw, which is the Phil American, the national record holder, Chilo Corrales Nelson's event, she's ranked 5th in the hammer throw, but still even though she's qualifying the shot put, the hammer's her best event, and she still needs a few more meters to hit that qualifying mark. We've got Grace Wong, obviously the favourite, and the Thai girls. Then moving to the women's javelin, we have 2 girls ranked in the top 10, but needing to still a little bit off that 51.80 bronze medal standard for the event, with the Thais and the Vietnamese leading the event. 4x1, yeah, this is an event. If we get our same quartet from last time, 4 Phil American girls, they have a chance at getting the gold in that event, or the silver at least. But it's just as long as they're all available for the other issue is, are they all available for SEA Games because of college commitment overlaps? Who knows at this point? 4x4. I touched base on that earlier. We have Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia, and then probably Thailand, Malaysia, and the Philippines battling out for that bronze based on the current results. Heptathlon. Okay, so in the women's heptathlon, we have the defending champion Sarah McKinnon, who unfortunately, wasn't able to finish due to an injury in the long jump, but probably still fairly automatic because she is the defending champion, and also Alexi Camoso, who recently hit the standard in the women's heptathlon. So, background on Alexi Camoso is originally from Iloilo, training with national coach Sean Guevara, but not currently a member of the national team. But she had one of the best performances at the national championships in Baguio. Looking at the data, the Vietnamese girl at the top with 5,096 points is quite far ahead and has a lot of room for improvement in the throwing. So my tip is on this Vietnamese girl, but looking at how Alexi is not that far behind these two other athletes, I think that, since she is relatively raw in the heptathlon event and she's got a lot of work she can currently do, I think that Alexi could push up into a medal, possibly a silver or bronze against these other two, but the girl at the front is quite far in front and has a lot of easy room for improvement in the throwing events regarding that. Then looking at the men's event, impressive thing in the men's event, and this performance is still being verified, as a 15-year-old from Thailand, 15-year-old with 10:24 time, which is still being sort of verified, but we've got lots of guys here, in the 10.2s, 10.3, 10.4 range. We don't really have anyone of that caliber, perform yet this year. There are athletes in the team who are capable of running 10.5 and 10.4, but no performances has been registered by those athletes yet. Hopefully, they'll show these performances at the next few meets that may come up in the next few months. In the men's 200, the 15-year-old Thai launched a 20.70 time, which is the best in Southeast Asia. It's it was just phenomenal seeing that 2070 at the National Opens coming from an athlete so young, who's only 15 or 16, I believe, and that's ahead of all the senior athletes. So this guy is one to watch from from Thailand, which I want to reiterate that, Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia have all produced very good youth sprinters. Indonesia with Zuri, Singapore with Mark, I can't remember his name, the guy coached by Ben Bayu, Mark, and the hurdle guy, and Malaysia before with Azim and Mr. Jantan. They're producing good youth and junior sprinters. So it shows that we do have genetic material in Southeast Asia to produce good male sprinters as well, but we really need to scout, and apply some good methods to get. I see. All right. Perhaps, but do you need to head off at this point?
Yes, me too. Yeah. Okay. So, yes. Thank you for
I'll
the
just
time.
finalize this, but you can hit. It's okay if you want to head off. I'll
Yeah.
just finalize the discussion, and then you can head off now before I finalize.
Yeah. Okay. So for
Something.
now, I say goodbye to everyone, and then Andrew will continue the discussion on the statistics. Thank you, Coach Pio,
Yeah, I'll just
for.
finalize these statistics on the male side, and then we'll wrap it up. I mean,
Okay.
just go through this data.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, buddy, and take care. Okay.
You're most
Goodbye.
welcome.
Bye.
Thanks. I'll just check. So just carrying on with the set of data that we were presenting here regarding the Southeast Asian rankings and events. I'll just scroll down a bit further. So in the 400 meters, we don't have anyone ranked yet in the top 10 at this point. looking at the 400 meters, it seems that Indonesia has emerged as a candidate in the men's 4x4. They didn't have any team in the last SEA Games in the men's 4x4, but now they seem to. So Vietnam, who was defending champions, is there. Surprisingly, Thailand has only got one athlete ranked in the top four, so they're sort of lagging a little bit behind in terms of preparation for 400 runners. Philippines, of course, got third in this event. I believe that their winning time at the national championships was 48.11. In retrospect, to cut off at the top 10, which was 48.04 to be ranked in the top 10 in Southeast Asia. The 800 meters. Looking at the 800 meter event, we have Giron leading with 1:53.15. So the 800 meter times, due to the pandemic and some retirement of athletes and athletes not doing as well as they should, is now, you know, the nobody's actually hit the bronze mark, but you know, we have the number one ranked in that event in the 800 through Edwin Giron, a former Asian junior, 8th place at the Asian Juniors back in 2018. And you know, the surprise actually in the SEA Games results is the top two from the last SEA Games. Well, to start with, the defending champion and probably the greatest runner in SEA in Southeast Asian Games history, Mr. Dong Van Tai, ended up coming about 5th or 6th at his national championship. So as so far hasn't made team to go to Vietnam to defend his title. And then the second place, Carter Lilly, hasn't had any performance since March of 2020 in terms of registering times on the board. So moving up to the 1500 meters event, we have the rankings for the men's 1500 meters. The leading athlete in the men's 1500 meters is Tuntavadi of Thailand with 350. And then also the Timor-Leste athlete is in Vietnamese. The men's 1500 meter standards are not very high because we had the slowest winning time at the SEA Games in 59 years. At the last SEA Games, only a time of 4:06, a more tactical race. So the cutoff for the top 10 was 3:56, but this is an event which is easy pickings to qualify for because the standard's only 4:08 for that event. So far, in terms of qualifiers for that event, Mariana Misano, who was even though not in the top 10, went above the SEA bronze and also the SEA silver mark with a 4:07 run at winning the national championships in Baguio. And also Louis Agawa went underneath the bronze standard with a 4:08 run in the 1500. So there's at least two qualifiers in the 1500, with the standard being a bit lower in the 1500 and it being a more easy event to make that time. Then in the men's 5,000 meters, Tuntavati, the defending champ, also leads that event. The only one really under 14 minutes. Sonny Wagdos placed third at the last SEA Games with the bronze and big personal best of 14:34.75, but still needs to register a performance. By default, the medalists are there if no one else qualifies for the event, to my understanding. Men's 10,000 meters, Olympic qualifier Kiran Tuntavati, Thailand, the Thai American, is nearly 4 minutes ahead of everybody else in that event, so looking like very highly likely to defend his 10,000 meter championship that he won at the last SEA Games. We have no other qualifiers in the men's 10,000 meters. I believe it was a 32 or a 33 minute winning time in the national championships, with 31:46 cutoff and 30.29 as the bronze medal standard for the SEA Games. Steeplechase. Again, this is an event which shouldn't be too difficult to qualify with a lower standard of 9:10.02 and a winning time of 9:04.50, with this event usually won in sub 9 minutes in the past, with the Philippines notching up no fewer than 6 titles from the great Hector Biggio, 5 from Rene Herrera, 1 from Eduardo Buenavista, and 2 from Christopher Albrook Jr. So that's a tally of 6, 11, 12, 14 times has the SEA Games emerged the champion, has the Philippines emerged champion at the SEA Games in the men's steeplechase. Right now, we just have Junel Gabocha ranked in the top 10, but this is an event where we could possibly, qualify more athletes into as it has a lower qualifying time than some of the other events. Then moving up to the men's marathon, we have Tony Payne, the Southeast Asian record holder, the Thai Kiwi, and Sorai Yong, the 2015 and 2017 SEA Games back-to-back champion from Singapore, in good shape, having recently broke his national record in Valencia. Pretty much, again, the standard was a bit lower in the marathon, 2:33:06, but as of now, we haven't really had marathons for men to qualify as of yet in that event, and we did not get top 3 in the last, so by default, really, we don't have anyone qualified in the men's marathon at this point. And looking down the list further, again, I was saying in regards to 20K the walks, we don't have anyone qualified, but potentially we could develop athletes in that event if we had more competitions available for them. And now looking at the 110 hurdles, those times I got reported to me from Malaysia were actually hand timed. So the 13.8 and the 14.0s are more like 14.1s and 14.2 times. We have Clinton Kingsley Bautista as defending champion in that event, ranked in the top 10. Only Clinton so far, so by default he's the defending champion, and no one else has hit the standard, so he's automatically there to defend his title. Up against him will be challenge of Sofian of Malaysia, the 2017 SEA Games champion, and Rio Malhotra, who leads the SEA Games ranking lists at this time. Moving down to the next event of the 400 hurdles, very clearly the 33-year-old Eric Cray leads the rankings with 49.68, having just missed out on those Olympics by a few points. But very dominant at the Southeast Asian level, probably the greatest ever hurdler the Philippines has ever had in SEA Games, if not probably the greatest 400 hurdler in SEA Games history. Having won 4 titles on this event in 2013, 15, 17, and 19, he's looking to pocket his 5th title in the men's 400 hurdles and seems convincingly ahead of everybody else in his respective event by nearly 2 whole seconds. And looking at the long jump next, we have heptathlete, decathlete bronze medalist from the last SEA Games, January Ubis, ranked in the top 3, behind the 2 Vietnamese. It seems that Sapatu Rahman and Andrea Nura, who are both 8-meter jumpers, are yet to hit that kind of form going into the SEA Games. We'll wait and see over the next couple of months. But Ubis seems to be in very good shape in positioning for medal at the SEA Games in the long jump at this point in time. Now moving further down the list to the men's triple jump, it seems that the list has been led by Andre Noor, who had an incredible jump, which just ended up being a foul, but it was nearly, it was a high 16-meter jump that he had at the last SEA Games. More of a long jumper, but also now putting some effort into the triple jump. So we also have ranked, not actually ranked in the top 10 yet, but Harry Diones of the Philippines, the silver medalist at the last 2 SEA Games, cleared an opening jump of 15.24 at the SEA Games. So hopefully some more comps will get his performance up in time for the next SEA Games in 2022. The high jump, we've got 1 athlete ranked, the young Leonard Gross, who played at the last SEA Games at 2:06, but the SEA Games Malaysians have been very dominant the last few SEA Games with 220 up jump, 220-meter up jumps, and so the Thais and the Vietnamese have some 215 up jump athletes there. Moving to the men's pole vault, EJ Obiena is convincingly ahead of his nearest rivals, with the move coming from Som Ang, his Southeast Asian rival from Thailand, moving up his performance to 561. So Som Ang, I believe, was silver or bronze behind EJ, along with Puran. I think silver behind EJ, or it might have been Puranot, the other Thai. There's quite a lot more 5-meter jumpers these days than there has been in the past. Because before you could jump maybe 460 or 470 and land the bronze, and now you've got 5 guys already over 5 meters during the pandemic, which shows that the depth of pole vault in the quality and depth of pole vault in Southeast Asia has really gone up significantly. So you need at least a 5 to get to the SEA Games at this point. In the shot put, as of now, no registered performances from William Morrison, the defending Southeast Asian Games champion from the Philippines, the Southeast Asian Games record holder. Last performance being in February or March of 2020. So looking forward to seeing some scores on the board in the next few months from Big Willie Morrison of the Philippines. Right now, the leader for the season so far is Muhammad Ziad Zulkifli, who actually had a throw who's actually a Para Games athlete, who had a throw of 17.94 meters at the Para Games, but that throw was disallowed due to the fact to a technical issue with him not reporting to the roll call in time. But physically he did throw 17.94, so it was a legitimate throw, but it wasn't accepted because of the protocols with checking in on time for the roll call area. So the discus, the men's event is ruled by Irfan Shamsuddin of Malaysia, European based, who's been the SEA Games champion for the last few SEA Games. In the men's discus throw event, we have John Mantua ranked 7th and waiting on the performances of silver medalist in the last SEA Games, William Morrison, based in the United States. The hammer throw, it's a battle really between Bumawan of Thailand and Jackie Wong Shuchair of Malaysia, 2 former and reigning SEA Games champions in that event. It's surprisingly, national throwing coach Arnold Ferreira ranks 7th still in that event, a former 4-time SEA Games champion in the hammer throw in his prime, now national coach. And in the javelin throw, we have some surprising performances with the Indonesian and Vietnamese athletes throwing well over 71 meters. I believe these 2 were the silver and the bronze medalists behind Melvin Calano of the Philippines, who's opened with 65.64. He, of course, had an incredible throw of 72.86 meters at the SEA Games, which I believe was very close to the national record of his coach, Danilo Fresnido. The SEA Games champion before twice. Looking at the events and the relays, we have a qualifying standard of 40.04 in the men's 4x1. As we finished 4th in the last SEA Games, that's the benchmark, is to hit that 40.04 to put a team together for the SEA Games. So far, because we landed medals in the women's 4x1, the women's 4x4, the mixed relay 4x1, the mixed relay 4x4, and the women's 4x4, by virtue of placing, we were automatically qualified in every single relay except for the men's 4x1, which we finished 4th in, with the SEA bronze standard at 40.04 for the qualification to add a team to that event. In the decathlon, it's been ruled twice by Aries Toledo of Philippines with a 70.33. Aries didn't line up they used a heptathlon event at the national championships instead of the 10 decathlon event. Aries was not able to run up at the national championship, so we don't have a performance yet from him this season. But Aries has won the last 2 SEA games with scores of over 7,000 points. And as of now, the leader in the men's decathlon event is Mr. Bui Van Su of Vietnam. I believe he was the silver medalist, tucked in between Toledo and Ubis at the last Southeast Asian Games. We don't really have any data on the Philippines yet in the decathlon, as we haven't had a decathlon event during the pandemic at this point. So that pretty much rounds up today's talk. It's been nearly an hour. Thank you all for bearing with my long, grueling talk regarding athletic statistics on where we're at the moment in the SEA Games based on the current ranking lists. I'd like to open the door to any questions before I sign off on this 1 hour chat session for today. I'd just like to shout out and say thank you to all our viewers. We had a significant amount of viewers watching our presentation today. So thank you all, and we're going to wrap it up there.